"Crew to battle stations," the captain cried out, his voice booming in the bridge as the background lights turned red. Hundreds of my fellow crew members began to move around the bridge as the sounds of fire and crackle roared to life. Shells and other types of ordnance fly across the empty vacuum of space as the battle had just begun. A major battle between two races, the Icelands, known for their technological superiority and an all-around corrupt major superpower in the known cosmos, and my comrades, the Nynths, a race that was just making their ends meet. The war started several months ago, when the Icelands decided to harass both our major and minor shipping lanes through piracy and taxation. It was fine at first, having to resort to increasing our security and avoiding Iceland markets, but it escalated quickly when the Icelands decided to invade Prajschet 126, one of two Nith trade centres that kept that nation's economy from going under. Typical of their political agenda, the Icelands claimed that the trade centre was theirs to own, saying that the system was within their territory. We know it was absurd, and the rest of the nations within the Federation knew this, but nothing was done about the ensuing problem. No actions were taken. The Icelands were simply too influential and powerful in their domain, that even if the rest of the Federation would join forces and fight the Icelands, they would be stepped under the soles of their shoes. Our civilians urged the government to stoke the fires of war, the endearing, powerful voices of the high-ranking officials now calling onto the Senate to bring forth the guns to take back what was rightfully ours, and we did. We called to arms, and no allied nations came to our aid. They knew it was a one-way battle at this point. What were our officials thinking? Have they lost their minds? Within a month in the war effort, we already lost 25% of our ships to the much more powerful fleets of the Iceland Dominari, and our territory had already been slowly chipping off to their hands. The hundreds of civilians that volunteered to the war effort were either dead or enslaved. We knew that the war between us and them would eventually go in their favour, until some human got caught in the middle of it. The humans were at first a simple fractured nation of bipeds that came into the picture a few centuries ago. Known for their peaceful agenda, they were the lowest of the bunch, with any conflicts that occurred in their lands returned to peaceful negotiations and deals. They were nothing special, being called the embarrassment of the galaxy due to their weak nature. I mean, come on. They were easily conned to the worthless products that the markets had to offer. Hell, even our markets joked about the humans trading worthless junk for even more worthless junk than we had. One seller even boasted how one person has been buying loads of dried up seeds from him. Seeds that were so worthless that you can get a ton of it for just a few credits. To know what happened, that same human who buys the seeds was caught in the middle of the crossfire. A small freighter vessel that carried hundreds of tons of that thing was shot down by the Icelands as it went past through the trade route in the piracy attempt. Knowing the humans, they decided to leave him dead, adrift in the vast void of space, and we quickly picked them up the moment the Iceland fleet left the sector. The human was nothing special. He was only wearing something that he called casual clothing. He was carrying a bag filled with some cooking utensils, 3 small packs of brown powder he called sugar, and 2 small sacks of those seeds, which he begged that we should carry a container of it. We didn't approve of it. Our storage bay is already filled to the brim with more important supplies, and he wanted to squeeze in a container of worthless seeds of it? Embarrassing human. The human stayed with us for a month, and thanked the stars that the human wasn't bothering anyone or anything out of the ordinary, asked the captain to send him home to the nearest Terran outpost, and he agreed, wanting to leave the human out of our ship for good. While that was happening, he spoke to us that the seeds in Prajschet 126 were so cheap that he said it was a gold mine. We snickered on that thought when he said those words. Even if Prajschet had much more goods were more valuable than just those seeds, he just kept blabbering why he constantly brought them. Eventually he would request a few tools to be used in his spare time. A small grinder, pasteurizers, a metal bowl, and access to the kitchen. We allowed it as it won't take much time before he would be dropped off at the station. The cooks and I watched him bring that sack and his cooking equipment in the kitchen, took what was like a quarter of his contents, and began removing the shells. He separated every seed with accuracy, sorting them in 3 various sizes, and roasted them. After the debacle, we began rounding up the roasted seeds, cutting them into smaller pieces. He even tripped and fell to the cold, hard metal when his biped leg got caught in the stool and spilled a bowl of it onto the floor. We laughed before he sighed and picked up the wasted thing like it still has worth. He scooped the major parts and cleaned the spilled waste that he had created. He eventually returned to grind up the seeds again. This time he was pushing them with a large club, and it came out oozing, sticky paste in which he asked one of our cooks to help him out by holding the bowl. I could tell that the cook was disgusted with it, seeing the paste fall to the bowl and the strong scent of which he had almost hurled his entire lunch onto the paste-filled bowl. The human didn't notice the debacle, as he just said his compliments and left the cook to his own devices. He started on pouring some paste in a machine that he carried, poured a few liquids and sugar within, and flicked the switch, making a loud whirring sound as it was activated, and lasted a whole day cycle for it. The head cook was furious about it and complained about the noise, but gave off the human a warning when he apologized and stated he won't repeat the process. Embarrassing human. He started on pulling out several containers and circular molds, and began to pour the leftover paste onto the molds, and asked the cook once again to pour the processed paste onto the small containers and place them in the freezer, while wearing a mask for him not to bask in the excruciating scent the kitchen had to handle for that day. The human was smiling, taking a whiff of the heavy scent, saying out a good compliment. He would jam the paste into shapes and place most of them into a container for us to use. Some of us would snicker, as to know why anyone would want to consume such things. All I did was repeat the words of the human when I got to try the warm hot product that was introduced in the cafeteria for my daily routine. Fuck me. Apparently the human had been up very early on his schedule and woke up one of the cooks and servers to help him boil down some moulded up, hardened paste, turn it into some sort of broth, and added sugar and milk, and served it up to them. Eventually hijinks ensued in the kitchen, as they began to wake up the rest of the cooks and servers to try what the human had created. Many of the crew had woken up because of the growing riot that happened in the kitchen. That silence didn't last long, because by the time the concoction was served to the crew, the noise turned up to the roof when loud ambiances of laughter and energetic glee would break out in the cafeteria. He called it sequate, or in simpler terms, hot tablea. A sweet drink that was meant to drink before and after our shifts to either energize or calm us for the day. This also boosted morale overall in the ship, as the drink made the crew more active and efficient during their shifts. He also introduced chocolate, a delicacy in humans that was used as snacks, and our crew were loving it, consuming them during breaks. Turns out, he's been using these two products in a business that has been booming to the far reaches of the cosmos. I can't believe that our markers have been selling these seeds at a very low price, and they still haven't figured out how the human had made such a fortune out of these. The cooks were interested in making such a delicacy, in which he agreed, teaching them the basics and measurements until he was out of our hair, thanking us, and leaving us with his equipment and the ingredients on board. How I wish to see that embarrassing human once again. Fire the kinetic warheads, aim it towards their right formation, the captain yelled out his voice, as the ship began to fling out the said warheads towards the Arlesian armada. Explosions rocked the ship when a plasma bolt had struck the hull of the ship, dealing heavy damage to our energy cores, and we began to make our next move. The fleet of 12 Ninth vessels were now reduced to 3, and barely has enough willpower to fight. We gave our all in the fight, and which we have decided to sacrifice ourselves to the rest of our ships to escape to the nearest jump point. Keep our guns focused at their right flank. We need to make way for the rest to retreat, the captain ordered us once again, as the detection officers called out to the captain about the impending arrival of unknown ships into the sector. The captain groaned. What could it be now? We are already dealing with the Iceland fleet as it is. If these ships are going to be a problem for us, then that... They ask about needing more of those cacao beans, Captain. The what? What do you mean by cacao beans? We have an entire fleet up our heights and you ask me about beans? And the captain would get angry before I would realise what was happening. That embarrassing human has returned. The sudden jump of the Terran fleet into the sector startled my fellow crew, seeing a vessel that dwarfed our own. They would begin slinging out their guns and fighter craft, engaging the Iceland armada without any question. A few of the vessels would begin firing their own ordnance into the enemy fleet, as the weapons pierced through their hulls and shields like it was paper. Any ordnance coming straight for our ship was instead directed towards the new fleet, and they just shrugged them off like dust. The Iceland ships were falling, one by one like paper. Sir, you have a line request from one of the Terran ships. The captain agreed to open the line, seeing the same clumsy human that was dressed in casual clothing, now bearing an officer's uniform, his smile still overbearing with bliss and glee. This is Admiral Yrrol of the Unified Terran Coalition. Fleet designation, Sabagutia of Mars. Do you need more hot tablea, or am I just late for the party? He chuckled, as he grabbed a mug of that hot concoction, and placed it between his lips. Took you long enough, embarrassing human.